great to see everybody here this morning. It's great to come and just take this time to worship and to celebrate all that God has done for us. We're continuing on with our series, Prodigal. We've been talking about being poured out and pouring things out into the lives of others and other people. And today we're talking about being devoted and what we're devoted to and what our life has been poured into. And we're going to be looking today at Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24, and the lesson that Jesus taught there about what we're devoted to and about what we are, in fact, focused upon. So if you have your Bible, turn with me to Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. These are the words of Jesus. He says, "Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, and if your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." On May 1st and 2nd of 2010, a torrential rainstorm hit Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi. And more than 13 inches fell in those 2 days during that time span, causing the Cumberland River to rise 52 feet. That's a lot of water. And it spilled over into these towns and areas. One of the particular areas that was really hard hit was Music City itself, which is Nashville, Tennessee. An important place for people that are into music, specifically country music, but music in general. A place that has a lot of historical significance, a place that is the home of the Grand Ole Opry, and in addition to that, countless musicians that call this spot in the road their home, where they come back. It's kind of their home base, so to speak. Many of these musicians, in addition to dedicating their lives to their craft, dedicating their lives to being good musicians, they've also dedicated their lives to something else, and that is acquiring the best instruments that they can find. Over the course of their several years, they acquire things that were made many, many years ago by some fantastic luthiers, people that are making these kind of instruments, and they have a historical significance besides being good for their task of playing music. And they've become rather rare and quite valuable, and people have been dedicated to collecting them and having them and owning the best ones. And one of the locations hit hardest by this flood was a place called Soundcheck Studios. And Soundcheck Studios was a place where countless artists housed their instruments. They had different lockers in this place, and when they'd come back off the road, off their tour or whatever, they would fill these lockers with their instruments, with these high-dollar pieces of equipment, and they were taken well care of, and people managed them, made sure they were safe and humidified, and everything was perfect. And all the conditions were perfect until that day. By all accounts, this was one of the biggest floods that ever hit that place, hit that area. It was devastating. 24 people lost their lives. People lost their homes. People lost their livelihoods. And for these musicians, one of the things they lost in one fell swoop were most of their instruments. These things that they devoted their time and energy to collecting, they were gone in just a couple of days. For 6 days, they sat in the water before the water receded. When the water finally went down, they went in to explore the damage. And as they went through, they had to avoid the snakes because there was a lot of snakes that ended up in there, and they were kind of dangerous. They were trying to avoid the snakes, look around, and they found these moldy, mildewy guitar cases and instrument cases. They'd open them up and find that necks had been warped, parts had already begun to mildew, and it was a mess. The water was at least 3 or 4 feet inside of that building, and everything was gone. Most everything was destroyed. What they had been devoting their life to, in one instance, had passed away. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is teaching a lesson in regards to what we're devoted to. The crowds had followed him up to a mountainside. So he sat down and began to teach. And he taught on a variety of topics at that point. And one of the things that he taught about was found in these verses 19 through 24 that we're talking today, and talking about what we're devoted to. And from this passage, we learn that following Jesus requires our total devotion. That needs to be what we are devoted to. From this passage, we'll find three different truths that will help us to understand this as we seek to follow Jesus in all that we do. The first one is found in verses 19 through 20 of Matthew chapter 6. So if you want to turn back with me there, verses 19 through 20. Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." The first lesson we learn from all of this is that the treasures of earth, the things that we gather here, they're fleeting. These treasures of earth are fleeting. Jesus points out that the things of earth, they don't last. We can find no security in what the earth of the world has to offer. If you're a person that follows the stock market, you see it goes up and down. What you have today, what you've invested in, it may be gone tomorrow. It may pass away in the blink of an eye. The possessions that we've collected, the things that we've acquired, the things that are important to us, they can be lost or destroyed. Or we may pass away and they're left to somebody else to dispose of as they wish. These things don't last. No matter our efforts to preserve what we have, it all will pass away, or we will, whichever comes first. Turn with me, and Jesus was trying to illustrate this in another place, Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. Luke 12, verses 13 through 21. In the parable of the rich fool, he said, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' Jesus replied, 'Man, who appointed me a judge or arbiter between you?' Then he said to them, 'Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.' And he told them a parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' And then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich towards God.'" The real issue when it comes to possessions is it's not about having things. It's what our attitude is about them. What is our attitude about the things we have? What is the attitude about what we put our mind to and how we view things? How do we view money and material possessions? Are they tools? Do we use them for some enjoyment? Do we use them to bless other people? We have to ask ourselves, do we attempt to cling to what we have, cling to what we've acquired? Or are we generous with other people? Do we pour out into the lives of other people what God has richly blessed us with? Are we willing to share what we have with other people? Are we willing to give generously to be a blessing to the lives of other people? We have to ask ourselves, are we doing that? How do we view what it is that we have? How do we view these things? As followers of Jesus, we have to understand that our security isn't found in what we have and what we amass here on our short time here on earth. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we pour our energy into? What do we pour our lives into? What's our attitude towards our jobs, our retirements, our possessions? What is it that we have put our focus on and given our attention to? If we've gotten things out of order, we have to look at that and say, you know what? What is it that matters most? Are these the things that matter most in our lives? Are these the things that we need to focus on? Have they become a distraction for us? Because these things pass away. Our society has put forth the idea of what we need to have. They tell us all the time, this is what you have to have. If you're going to be happy, if you're going to be successful, this is what you've got to accumulate. And I was looking this week, and I thought it would be interesting to see, they have these things I noticed online called a retirement calculator. and you punch in your information. You punch in how old you are. You punch in how much is in your savings account, and they factor all those things in, and they can tell you when you were able to retire. I strongly recommend you do not go home and do this. That is a bad idea. Because frankly, I don't even know if I'm going to live to 95. And I really wish I was making that up, but that's exactly what it told me. 95 years old. And I thought, well, that's cool because I'll be here for the next 50th anniversary, so I'll be able to celebrate with whoever's around. We'll be here. If you look at those things, if you dwell on those things, it can get really discouraging, right? If you begin to look at those things, you realize that stuff passes away and you think, I can never have enough. This is never going to work out. I don't understand what I'm going to do. And it becomes a real distraction. And we begin to shift our attitude towards what we can never obtain, what we can never gain. Jesus is making the point in Matthew 6 that this is the wrong focus and the wrong attitude for us. We need to focus on Christ. We need to focus on Him and not allow ourselves to be sucked in to what the world has put forth that we need, whether it be a retirement account, whether it be cars and homes and possessions, or awesome guitar collections, although that would be pretty cool. It can't be those things. We need to focus on Christ and make Him the most important thing in our life, the thing that we've put our attitude on, because these things, they'll all pass away. Anything that we have here in a moment could be gone. It could be taken from us while we're here, or we could be taken from this earth and it will be left to somebody else. So we need to make sure we are investing in what's most important, and that's Jesus Christ. There's a second lesson that we learn from this passage. What we value is an indicator of our hearts. Verse 21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus is pointing out here that people's hearts are wrapped up in their treasures, and fewer treasure God as they should. They don't treasure God as they ought. Jesus' words cause us to face a tension that lies between our actions and our words as we follow Jesus. Jesus is shedding light on people here that claim to have a value of eternity, that look at eternity and say, that is what I value. That is what's most important. But then their lives look totally different. It looks like they value something else. It looks like they value something that doesn't matter. And that's the tension that's here. That's what we're looking at. What is our treasure? Our heart's going to be with what we treasure, Jesus says. What is most important to us? He's referring here not to our physical heart that pumps the blood throughout our body. He's talking about our mind, our emotion, and our will. What's our mind focused on? What is it that captures our thoughts? What is it that we're thinking about all the time? What is it that occupies our thoughts when we lay down, when we go to bed, and when we wake up in the morning? What is it that taps our mind throughout the day? What are we thinking about? Hopefully we're thinking about Jesus. He's also talking about here our emotions. Oftentimes we ride these emotional roller coasters through life, and it's really based upon how things are going. Do I feel like I have enough? Do I feel like I have what I need? And when things go bad, we get really frustrated when things happen in our lives, when things happen and it causes us to outlay money that we didn't want to outlay. It causes us to panic. And we ride these emotional roller coasters because we're attached to that. We're focused on that. It's also talking about that will. What is it that we put our effort into? What drives us every day? What do we put our energy towards? Hopefully that's Jesus Christ. This treasure isn't always limited to financial things either. For some of us it's possessions, but for some people it's relationships and family and their hobbies. Whatever it is that they pour their life into, whatever the most important thing is, whatever it is that they value. It can be a variety of things for different people. We have to set our mind on God and not what is here on this earth. Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Paul writes this. He says, since you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. He's encouraging the church of Colossae to be thinking about what's most important. What is it that we value? There's a constant evaluation process of our priorities that has to take place. This is something that's just not a one-time thing. We say, you know what, I've got it figured out. Because it's easy to allow ourselves to drift off in the wrong direction. It's easy to lose our focus as things arise and as things come up. We need to be constantly asking ourselves, am I focused on Christ? Am I focused on what he has called me to? Am I focused on telling other people about him? Am I living for him and devoted to him in all that I do? Am I devoted to something else? Hopefully we're devoted to Jesus. This is something that we have to do a checkup on ourselves all the time to make sure that we're okay, to make sure our heart's where it should be. For some people in this room, you guys have had the opportunity to have a heart checkup. Now, I've never had to go through this myself, and I hope I don't, but they do a thing called a stress test where they put you on a treadmill and they wire you all up with stuff. And you have to walk on the treadmill, and they check your heart, and they monitor how that works. And I'm not a doctor, I don't know how it all works. But they monitor that, and they make sure that the blood is pumping as it should to make sure your heart rate is what it should be. And if things come back negative, if they come back that they're not where they should be, they go a little further. And they take it to the inside, and they do kind of an internal check. And they begin to look at your arteries and look to see if they've been blocked with plaque or anything on the inside restricting that blood flow, causing it not to work. And if it's not working properly, they put things in called stents to open up the blood vessels and allow the blood to flow closer to normal levels. For followers of Christ, we have to constantly be monitoring our spiritual heart. We have to be monitoring our spiritual heart and seeing, is it where it should be? What's taking our time? What's taking our energies? What's taking our resources? Are things in our life blocked up and blocking our heart from what's most important, focusing on God? Are there things in our life that somehow or another, and we didn't see it even coming, have those things gotten in our way? Just in our own lives, just in our human bodies, when our arteries get blocked, we don't even know it sometimes. We're functioning day to day. We wake up in the morning, and if you ask them, they say, I feel fine. And then the next thing you know, by the end of the day, they've suffered a heart attack, and they had no inkling that this was going to take place. Our spiritual life kind of works like that too. Sometimes we feel fine. I'm fine. I go to church. I go to a Bible study on Wednesday night. I'm fine. But really, our body we've gotten ourselves so conditioned to how we feel and how this is that we've lost focus really on what's most important. We're doing a few of the right things, but we've lost the focus, and what's really driving us is something totally different. We need to make sure those things are in order as we seek God and seek to follow him. There's a third lesson that we learn. Our eyes must be fixed on Jesus. Turn back with me to Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 through 24. Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. When Jesus is speaking of the eye in this passage, it comes from an Old Testament idea, is what they're talking about there. That the eye denotes the direction of a person's life, the direction of where they're going. Eyes are good, are doing things that they should be doing, being focused on God. They demonstrate generosity to other people. They keep a single-minded focus on being a true disciple of Christ. Those eyes that are bad may think that they have light, but their vision has gotten blurry. Their vision has gotten skewed, and it needs to be remedied. Their vision's blocked from God. For the follower of Jesus, we have to seek God and his kingdom. We need to be seeking after him, and seeking that is the most important thing in our life. Later on in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, Jesus says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Preceding that, he's talking about being worried, and being worried about these things of the world, being worried about what's going on. Do I have enough to eat? Do I have clothes to wear? Do I have these things? And Jesus is saying here, don't worry. Don't worry. Fix your eyes on me. Seek my kingdom. seek and desire me. We can't have a divided loyalty. We can't have a divided loyalty between a lot of different things. We can't be loyal to our God, loyal to jobs, loyal to money, loyal to our hobbies, and loyal to our family. We can't have all of these divided attention because it becomes really distracting. We get focused on all of these things and we're not able to follow Jesus as we should. We think it works. We think, well, I can do all of these things. It's great. I can take a piece of the pie here, following Jesus. I can do this thing over here. And we can focus on all these things and we become distracted. And it doesn't allow us to do what Christ has called us to do. It doesn't allow us to be the person that Christ has called us to be. Recently, there have been some campaigns dealing with being distracted and having kind of a distracted vision. I want to show you one of those really quick right now. Watch the subtitles.
Using the power of the internet for good. Hey, I'm Jillian Pentamale, and this is Buzz60. Everybody knows you shouldn't text and drive, but a nonprofit in Belgium released a video showing you why. Responsible Young Drivers did an experiment where they told a bunch of driving students that a new law is going into effect. If you want to pass the test, you have to prove that you can text and drive safely. Not surprisingly, it was impossible.
Oh, oui, je vous incrois, hein? Ton GSM, je vais chercher des frites. Regarde tout ce qu'on s'en va. Oh là là, nous entrerons.
He's asking them simple questions like, I'm going to get French fries or I'll be back in a minute.
This isn't the first time RYD has done something like this. Their website is filled with other ways they've physically shown people how dangerous driving can be when you're distracted or drunk, like the Alka cart or the Alka Vision goggles.
They did this little experiment to show people what it was like when you were trying to drive and you're trying to text and you're trying to do all these things. You can't do both. You think you can, you think it works, you think it's not a problem, but when they actually put it to the test, when they actually put it to a challenge to see if you could actually do it, it didn't work very well at all because they were distracted. Their interests were divided. They were trying to drive, they were trying to text, they were trying to listen to this guy and what he was telling them to text. It didn't work. They weren't able to do that. We attempt to do the same thing in our spiritual life sometimes. We attempt to follow Jesus, but we attempt to focus on our jobs. We attempt to focus on what we want to acquire and what we want to possess. We have all these things going on. We think, I've got the balance. I'm able to do all these things. When it turns out, in fact, that it just leads to a crash because you can't manage all of these things. We can't manage all of these things in our life. Jesus has called us to be focused first on Him, to seek first God and His kingdom, to seek first what He has in fact called us to. Following Jesus requires from us a total devotion. It requires us being focused on Him. You see, these treasures of earth, these things that we think are important right now, all that stuff is fleeting. And our heart needs to be focused on Christ. Our heart focuses on what we value, and it needs to be Jesus. We need to fix our eyes on Him and follow Him with our whole life in all that we do. We've come to a point in our service where we have a decision to make. For those of us that have yet to make Jesus Christ our Lord and Savior, we invite you to come as we sing. We invite you to submit your life to Him and focus on Him first and make Him the most important thing in our life above anything else. Maybe we've gotten distracted and we just like somebody likes some prayers. We'd love to pray with you after service and just encourage you on your walk following Jesus. Wherever you're at, we invite you to come as we stand and sing.